One of the things that you talk about is DNA damage.
Yes.
My understanding is DNA cannot repair itself.
It can, but the kind of DNA damages that has been shown using microwave exposure, the exactly same type as for wireless internet systems, is such that it could maybe in the future evolve into, for instance, brain tumors. And so that's again a scary panorama in the future, and hopefully it will not. But I mean, after all, we are playing with the most precious item you have, namely your own children.
When you look at the studies you did with mice, do you think that there is a chance that within the third generation of females, they may be irreversibly sterile?
Not in the third generation, but in the fifth generation, and that would for humans be something in the order of 150 years ahead of us. And of course, then it's too late to say that you are sorry, and it's very too late to say stop. So I would suggest that you have, at least for the time being, a moratorium, a stop to these systems, use a wide in the meantime, and check out for effects of radiation. And again, as you said yourself, there is a wealth of papers. I mean, we're talking about thousands of published papers in the scientific literature, few of which, or sometimes none of which, have entered the official documentations from authorities and likewise. So I think it's really time to have an independent compilation of data. Such was done at August 31st, 2007 in the form of the Bioinitiative report, of which I was one of the authors. And then we put together approximately 2,000 scientific references on a little bit more than 600 pages, clearly saying that if you, for instance, if you are a rat or a mouse or a cell or a molecule, you should definitely not allow yourself to be exposed to this. And in the meantime, we have this full-scale experiment using our own kids.
Girls are born with all of the eggs they need in their ovaries at birth, their immature eggs. Now, if you're sitting with a transmitter in your lap, and that transmitter is transmitting through your ovaries, and the microwaves are genotoxic, there is a possibility that the microwaves can affect the genetic structure within the eggs. Now, the problem here is that the mitochondrial DNA, the genes inside the ovaries, is irreparable. So if you have a little girl who damages through this mechanism the genetic structure in one of her eggs, and she has a daughter, that daughter will carry that genetic problem. It is irreparable. And her daughter will carry that genetic problem because it's irreparable. And every female forever along that line will carry that genetic problem. It is irreparable. What should be happening is you should be measuring the amount of radiation in the room and seeing if it is safe for children. But I can tell you, without even looking, it isn't. And I'll tell you why. Because unlike medication, where there is a safe level for children, they have an adult dose and a child's dose, there is no safety level for microwave radiation for children. Not one. And it is my job as scientific advisor, I read, I translate papers from all around the world. And I have never, ever, no matter which country I've lectured in, which paper I've read, I have never, ever seen a single scientist brave enough to produce a safety level of microwave radiation for a child. There isn't one that exists. And I will tell you why. Because children do not have our immune systems. They're not developed. Their bones are soft. The microwaves penetrate very easily. Inside their bones they are producing stem cells, which make their immune systems and all other parts of their body. Their skulls are thin. There is a whole myriad of things which can go wrong, and children absorb more radiation than adults because they are smaller. They are nearer the wavelength, so they act as aerials. There is not a single safety level of microwaves for children, not one. The World Health Organization, they have recognized electrosensitivity. Our government says it doesn't exist. The school will say it's rubbish. But in fact, the World Health Organization does recognize and describe electrosensitivity. Now, what that means is that the countries that have tested microwaves within their country, they have all found in excess of 3% of the people are sensitive to microwave radiation. It's not everybody, it's around 3%. The Irish Doctors Association, who are Nobel Prize winners, think it may be as high as 15%. So what we are saying with your children is that a minimum, if somebody said to me, how many of our children are at possible risk of ovarian damage or leukemia or whatever, I would say at a minimum 15, at a maximum 75. Radiation below thermal levels, which is what you've got in your school, can cause neurological, heart problems, headache, fatigue, dizziness, menstrual disorders, irritability, drowsiness, sleeplessness, depression, anxiety, blood-brain barrier problems, neurotoxin problems, you name it, they're listed there. We knew this 30, 40 years ago. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is the name on the box that it comes out of. Knowing the research that we have, and I think I probably have some 40 big research papers showing this causes damage, supposing the worst comes to the worst, and as I say, I know 200 schools now with leukemia clusters, supposing the worst comes to the worst here, do you have insurance? Because if a child gets leukemia or some other genetic damage, and you go in front of a court, in front of a jury, and the jury says, yes, we've got all this evidence, we think this is now to blame, is there insurance? Because if there isn't, this whole exercise is pointless. And I would ask the school to show me the piece of paper that says your children have third-party medical indemnity for microwave sickness. I wouldn't have thought that was an unreasonable thing to ask for. I know it is, because I know they don't have insurance. And the reason I know is that 10 years ago, Lloyd's advised all insurance companies to write in an exclusion clause. So there isn't insurance.
Consultants who are dealing with children who have these problems due to the Wi-Fi and the maths, why won't they get together?
I have known 3, and Chris may have known others, I don't know. I have known 3 hospital consultants working for the NHS who have said, we agree with these other doctors, I am going to diagnose this person with microwave sickness, whatever branch of the microwave sickness. and within less than a day, they have all been called up, because it's a government body, and they have been said, or they have been told, change your diagnosis or get out of the NHS, get another job. The government will not have this recognised by a doctor within the NHS.
For what reason?
I'll tell you exactly why. There are two reasons. The first reason is that when you start counting the money, the government has made around 50 billion in licence fees, 50 billion in selling off the airspace. If you look, there are 60 million mobile phones, about 60 million Wi-Fi sets in the country. Imagine just the annual, the daily bill from each phone or each Wi-Fi on the internet is just £1 a day, which would be, I would think, quite low. That is £120 million this industry makes a day. 840 million a week, on top of what it gives the government. The other part of this, and I've got one of the articles here, several of these have been published. The government will not let this industry fail. If you take on this industry, you also take on the government. I know, I've worked with them. And the reason is that MI5, MI6, all of the security services, this is a gift beyond Father Christmas. Had they come to you 10 years ago and said, everybody in this country is going to carry around a little box by our order, we can tell exactly where you are any time of the day or night. We can listen to every single phone call that you're making. Even when it's turned totally off, if we want to, we can doctor your phone and listen to conversations you're having when you don't realise we're listening in. Here are your boxes, carry them. Oh, there is one benefit. If you push a few buttons, you can talk to somebody. I wonder how many people then would have taken them. The government has a threefold method for taking on any argument, whether it's science or not. The first thing they do, if there's something they don't like, is they ridicule it. The scientists and the science will be ridiculed. If that doesn't work, they deny. They will say, no, it isn't true. Our scientists say opposites. They will cause confusion. They will deny everything and cause confusion. If that doesn't work, they turn the legal tables, and this does work. Because unlike a drug company, if you were a drug company and you wanted to put something out that may or may not be risky, you would run a 10-year trial. And over that 10-year trial, you would then do your experiments, and at the end, it would be written up and peer-reviewed and then published. The government turned the table. The industry, whether it's Wi-Fi or masts or whatever, they do not have to show their product is safe. You have to show it isn't. Now, there is only one way to show something isn't safe, and that is by getting leukemia and having cancer clusters and dying. And when you've got enough people, you can go back and say, look, we've got all of these, we don't think this is safe. And they will say, aha, have you tested the water? Have you looked for radon? Have you tested the toothpaste? Whatever. And off you go. And if by some chance you manage to get scientists to do a 10-year study or whatever, they will then come back and say, aha, thank you very much. We have the scientific right to replicate this experiment to see that you are right. If you got me to do an experiment, 10 years, and in fact, I have tried 8 universities to do an experiment. They have all turned me down. The last one was the Open University, and they said to me, your work is too political. We cannot let you do it. But if there was a university, and I'm a university qualified experimental physicist, if you said to me, do an experiment, and I was able to get a university, and I spent 10 years, and we sent it to them, they would say, thank you very much, we will apply for funding, then we will run the experiment, we will see if it works. The funding will take about 5 years, the experiment will take 10, then we'll get somebody to read it. So you've bought them another 15 years. The argument still stands that you still have to prove this is dangerous because they've turned the tables. They will just lean back in their armchairs and say, fine, do it. Because you cannot, there is not a way on this planet that, given our lifespans, you can take these people to court proving what they have is dangerous. It is impossible to pass microwaves through a child and not have some chemical reaction going on inside the body. If a part of the child is a multiple of the wavelength, namely the head or the heart or the lung or something, or the child, they will then act as aerials. They can't do anything about it, because the moment you do something about it, you are admitting there is a problem. And the moment you say, these microwaves have caused this, there will be lawsuits enough to bankrupt any government in any country. And this is why. This is why they will never let you go to court, because if they lose, you will destroy everybody. There is too much money and too many heads will roll. When you close your eyes and you go to sleep at night, this electrical charge in the pineal gland is cut off. So your brain now knows it is dark outside and it is nighttime. And it releases what's known as nighttime melatonin. And the nighttime melatonin goes around your body at night when you're sleeping, and it mops up cancer cells, all sorts of nasties that have been produced in your body. Now, the problem is, if you sleep in a microwave field, if you have microwaves going through, or you have a child with a mobile phone there on standby, which is still transmitting several times a second to the nearest transmitter, those microwaves are going through the brain. So they can trick the pineal gland into thinking it's still daylight. And you can be, from the measurements that have been done, they have shown that your immune system can be 40% less effective in the morning if you have slept in a microwave field. So if you do not get rid of the microwaves when you're sleeping, this is the slow, slippery slope to you start getting more colds, more coughs, longer coughs, personality changes, which is always the first symptom, suicidal tendencies, anything you're prone to, you'll start to get. And then at the end of the line, we get up with the lymphoblastic leukemias and cancers and all sorts years down the line. But the greatest danger is without a doubt when you're sleeping. I think if you're deciding about your daughter's daughter's daughter, it is one mammoth decision to make. And I don't believe that decision should be taken out of your hands and given to somebody else. I really don't believe that. I do not believe they have the right to decide this risk for your generations. I do not believe that. And the second thing is, why run this risk anyway? All you've got to do is get a metre of cable and a 3-pin plug and plug it into the wall. And the whole thing is cured. No matter how respectful and how meaningful they are, I do not believe, knowing the risks as I know them as an international scientist, I do not believe they have this right to make that decision for your children. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
We are all now guinea pigs for electromagnetic radiation. Corporations and government are now developing and perfecting a global smart grid in which each of us will be monitored and each of our slightest actions will be recorded and transmitted by billions of digital devices placed all around us in our homes and our communities. Some of those devices are placed by us. All of them are paid for by us. But the data they collect is for someone else. We will never see our data. We will just see what corporations and government want to do to us with that data. That data is used to generate more taxes, sell more goods and services, and to arrest and penalize people whose data makes them look like they are not behaving the way government wants them to behave. This smart grid would be impossible or far more difficult if it were done over wires and fiber optic networks. The cheapest way to transmit this data is by wireless transmissions. Every institution has an infinite appetite for information about you. If government and corporations knew everything about every cell in your body every minute of the day, they would still want higher resolution data. They would want to know about your molecular chemistry and your emotional fluctuations. Your anxiety could be an indicator of your guilt, and they now have ways to measure anxiety from a video or audio recording. And they now can process and analyze all that data without human assistance. It is now to the point where no one has to search for information about you. Institutional computers will now bring you to the attention of authorities and marketers when you represent an opportunity for them. The only bottleneck is how to get all the data being collected on you over to them. Wireless technologies allow them to leapfrog the task of laying billions of miles of wires and cable, and this brings the smart grid surveillance network online at a highly accelerated rate. What this means to the guinea pigs, you and I, is that every slice of available transmission spectrum will be crammed with traffic about you for the collective, the corporations and public agencies who want to sell, tax, and arrest you for fun and profit. Cramming all those frequencies with traffic will cause some major catastrophes to public health and privacy. This smart grid program has taken the obsessive-compulsive approach. It is like they're saying, if a little humidity is good, then it would be even better if everyone were underwater. Saturating the biological environment with electromagnetic radiation is murder, mass murder. Biological organisms are electrical devices. Electromagnetic radiation induces electrical effects upon us. We are not designed to withstand massive bombardments of electrical induction, stimulation, and harmonic decomposition. Just as an opera singer can induce frequencies to shatter a wine glass, your cell phone, Wi-Fi computer, and smart meter induces shattering harmonics upon your body's cellular and molecular structures, your DNA. That is why electromagnetic radiation causes cancer, neurological disorders, birth defects, and a host of lesser symptoms. Electromagnetic radiation dismantles you from the inside out. In the years just ahead of us, we are about to see a whole lot more of those diseases, injuries, and symptoms. That is inevitable because we have already seen a whole lot more electromagnetic pollution of our living spaces. Billions of dollars are being made by corporations and governments by wirelessly wiring your world. They are downplaying the effects of electromagnetic radiation. They are bullying and threatening anyone who opposes the radiation rollout. They're pretending the downside doesn't even exist, and they're using all their money and power to squelch anyone who raises any inconvenient facts, evidence, or science. You may recognize this pattern from the DDT issue, the asbestos issue, the tobacco issue. In each one of those cases, those large and highly profitable industries managed, through propaganda and legislative lobbying, to suppress the truth until so many people died and the evidence was so overwhelming that even corrupt political leaders had no choice but to finally capitulate. DDT is now banned, asbestos is banned, and tobacco is becoming more severely restricted and taxed every day. Electromagnetic radiation is a major international industry with far more profit potential than DDT, asbestos, and tobacco combined. The wireless industries and tycoons are now suppressing information, attacking their opponents, spreading false and misleading information, investing billions in the rollout, and greasing the political wheels as they always do, and the political wheels are glad for the grease as they always are. Prepare to be personally exposed to levels of electromagnetic radiation far above and beyond anything ever experienced in human history. Prepare to be the guinea pig in an experiment with human cancers, mutations, illnesses, and death. Prepare to suffer that until the evidence is so clear and obvious that there will be enough victims to force the corrupt officials and the criminal corporate perpetrators to capitulate to the mountain of evidence and tragic human stories. There is no science to show that a massive overdose of EMF on the human population will be safe and harmless. All information and common sense indicates just the opposite. But this time it will be different than DDT, asbestos, and tobacco. The powers that be will never give up their wireless data collection network. They may offer to shield your digital devices. They may pay the settlements on your lawsuits. They may cry out to Congress about how vital the smart grid is for their businesses, for their security, for their profits and power, but they will not give up wireless technology without a major fight. Will you fight them? Because there are only two choices: fight or be radiated. Fight or accept birth defects, cancer, brain disease, and countless other unforeseen tragic consequences. Obviously, electromagnetic radiation must one day go the way of DDT, asbestos, and tobacco. The question is simply, at what point do we all realize that we must fight?